Now they probably are.
Now you can hear? Hi. It's okay.
Got pulled over and then I put my wires going.
No.
I'm here now.
I'm Sarah.
Hi, nice to meet you.
Nice to meet you. I'm glad you're here. Let's turn down the sound.
Okay. I think we can hear everything.
Mom, that's your phone.
I thought I had it turned off.
Sarah, on your Facebook, does it say Tulip Jar?
Let me see. Yes, it does.
Okay, well, I'm going on faith that that works.
It says, come join us for the Tulip Jar. Okay, we have sound. Okay, welcome. Actually, maybe I'll leave that plugged in. Okay. What
Hi,
time do
Taylor.
we have?
Hi.
What time is it? Are you asking me?
Yes.
It is 7:15.
7:15? We ready to go?
Sure.
You ready?
Sure.
Okay, great. Okay. Hi, everybody. Welcome to Let's Make Art. I'm so glad you're here with us tonight. We are doing this really fun project. We are doing the Tulip jar. Jar.
Ooh. I had to unmute
Thank
my
you.
mic.
And we have Taylor painting with us. And Taylor also works in our customer service, and she does an amazing job. So I'm so glad that she's here. And this is my mom, Kelly. She's painting.
Hello.
And my husband, Michael, is running the mic tonight.
Hello.
Keenan is traveling, so we will miss him, but also I like my husband, so it's okay. We are doing the tulip jar, and we are using 4 colors. So the colors that we are using are emerald green, azure blue, fuchsia, and lemon yellow. So those 4. So essentially you're just looking for a green, a blue, a pink, and a yellow. So whatever ones you have at home will work just fine. And we are using our round 2 and our round 6, our trusty brushes that we use every single time. And we have 7 steps in this project, which is more steps than we've ever had, but I felt like we really needed to break this one down. And you guys have been doing so good. I've been seeing your jars. So the very first step is we are actually going to lightly sketch our jar, because jars shapes are hard to like paint correctly the first time. So just take a minute, grab a pencil and an eraser, have one handy so we can sketch. The very second step is we're going to actually put color on our jar. The third step, we're going to do the tulip heads. The fourth step, we're going to do the stem and the leaves on the top part of the jar. Fifth step, we're going to put in our water line. The sixth step, we are going to do like the leaves and stems that are in the jar. And then the very last step is details. So you guys got this. I'm not worried about it. Okay. I'm going to put this to the side.
Sarah, before we get going, do you sell
Yes.
liquid watercolors and sets for Autumn Norton on Facebook?
We do sell sets of the Dr. P.H. Martin liquid watercolors, the Radiant, but the dandelion paints, we do not have sets made yet. But we're working on those. So you can get some in sets. Okay. Oh, there's Courtney. Courtney says she's watching but didn't run late. We'll catch up. She's the one that stopped in today. If you saw her Instagram, I took a little selfie with her. So it's so nice meeting you, Courtney. Thanks for popping in. Okay. Before we do our warm-up, we're going to take our oath. Okay?
All right.
So everybody raise your right hand and repeat after me. I promise to be kind to myself.
I
promise to be kind to myself.
I promise to not compare my work.
I promise
to
to
not
not
compare
compare
my
my work.
And I promise to have fun.
And I
And I
promise to have fun.
Thank you. And I like starting that way because sometimes we're like so competitive and we don't even know it. Or sometimes we like are so worried that it's not going to look like someone else's, and then it just takes the fun out of it. And that's not the point of painting, you guys. The point of painting is learning and creating and doing something for you, having fun. That's it. Okay, so we're going to start with our warm-ups. So go ahead and grab one of your brushes. And the first thing that we are going to play with today is a wet on wet technique. It's how we're going to kind of do our tulip heads. It's super fun, one of my favorite techniques and probably one of the best things about watercolor. So I want you to take your round 6 and get it wet. And then hit it off the side a couple of times, because if you go straight from water to paper, it's gonna be way too wet. So you kind of want to hit that off, and then make like a circle or any shape you want. And then almost immediately grab some paint, any color you want, and go along the edge of that circle. And it's gonna like move and bleed and go through. Now, sometimes if our water dries too much, too quickly, like if I make it wet and then it like is kind of dry and I try and put my water in, oh, that still moved really well. Never mind. But you don't want to let it dry too long, or else when you put the color there, it's not going to spread out. The other thing that you kind of want to be aware of is if you go straight and have like a pool of water on your paper, and then you try and put color in, most of the time, dang it, most of the time it will just like stay really still, like a dot in the pool. It won't spread out very well. Let me try again to see if I can explain what I'm talking about. Well, darn, it's just spreading. I can't, I'm sorry. I can't, but if it's not spreading for you, you might have too little water or too much water. So kind of just play with it, do it a couple different times. That was so funny. Okay, now, so this is wet on wet, and if you're new to watercolor, sometimes getting these textures could be really stressful because you want really smooth lines. But in watercolor, we love these super interesting, they're called blooms. I call them hard lines or textures. This is what I like to see personally. That is my preference, because I think it makes the painting interesting and it makes it your style. And there's always this element of accidental art that I love. Like, look at what that's doing right there along that edge. That's so gorgeous. I love it. Okay, so then the next thing that we are going to work on is values. So, and I do this warm up every single time because it's so important. If there's like one huge lesson I could impart upon you, it's to understand values, because that's how you give anything form and dimension. So the value has nothing to do with the color, it's all about the lightness or the darkness of a color. Now, the amazing thing in watercolor is if you want a lighter value, you just add more water. Whereas with acrylic or oil, you're adding white paint, like to make it lighter. This, in watercolor, we don't have to worry about that because the water and the paper and the paints do the work for us. Like, it's so great. So if you want a darker value, then you are going to use just mostly paint. And then as you lighten it up, you're gonna add more water. So what I want you to do is grab your brush, pick up some color, whatever color you want, and fill the belly of that brush with paint. So it's nice and filled with paint, and then you can do a shape or a rectangle, any kind of size. And this is going to be our dark value. So this is us using mostly just that paint. And then I'm going to rinse my brush just a couple of times, just like swish, 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 hit it off the side, and then paint a rectangle next to it. Now, automatically we're getting a lighter value, and that's just from adding a little bit of water. So I want you to keep doing that. And just keep on going until your color that you're laying down is like almost clear. And this is the really amazing thing about watercolor, is we have only picked up paint once. That's it. All of this is just from adding water to it, which is like the greatest thing. I love it so much because it just, I don't know, I feel like it makes my life easier. So if you're new to watercolor, but you're used to painting with like acrylics or oils, you might be scared to work within this range because you're like, that is so light, right? Where like this is where you feel more comfortable because you're used to like maybe that thick paint on the paper and not having it be as transparent as watercolor is. But with watercolor, you need all of these to have like a full feeling painting. So if you're looking at my tulip jar here, my jar is like over here. It's like my super lighter values. But then my leaves, some of my leaves and some of my flowers are over here. So make sure that when you're painting, you have a full range of value, and that's just gonna give your painting more dimension. It's gonna elevate it, give it a little bit more form. And it's fun. I like having the full range on there. So,
Sarah,
yes.
your adoring fans would like to know, how would you go about finding your own watercolor painting style if you were new to everything?
Sure, yes. That is a really interesting question. So for me, what happened was I started off by finding artists that I really enjoyed their work. And then that's actually how I started watercolors. I would find illustrators and I would see their paintings and I'd be like, I really want to learn to do that. So I started to learn by copying other people. I wouldn't sell it because that is against the law, but that's how I learned. And that's how you get in, that's how you learn like anything, right? Is you have to start copying other people who do it, and that's how you learn different techniques. And then what I started to do after doing that for a while is then when I would paint, I wouldn't look at anybody's work while I was painting. I would put reference photos away. I would put my computer away. I didn't want to be, what's the word I'm looking for? I didn't want to be tempted to paint in their style by looking at a different person's style while painting. Does that make sense?
It does.
So as you're painting, and if you want to paint in your own style, the biggest thing I can tell you is maybe paint from photographs and not other artists' watercolors. And then as you do that more and more, you're going to have natural tendencies and you're going to like start to explore and play. And that is when your own style will start to emerge. So really just kind of separating yourself from any other artist's work for a period of time until your style emerges. That's what I went about doing it. And it just takes time. And honestly, the style you make, it's gonna be changing all the time. So even if like you think you found it, as you keep on painting, it's gonna shift into something else. But that's the cool thing.
So in learning, when you're first learning to do watercolor and trying to figure out what you like and what's kind of your style, then it's okay to copy other artists' work or their style until you become comfortable enough to step away and say, okay, I'm ready to figure.
Yeah, I mean, that's how I learned, and I know, and I'm not saying copy other people's art and then like saying it's your own and selling it. That's not what I'm saying to do, but that's how everybody learns, is you find a picture or a painting that somebody made and you look at that and you go, I want to do that, because you love it so much that you want to create it yourself. And so that's how I started. There was an illustrator I loved. I started recreating her work in my own home, and I fell in love with watercolors that way. And then I started to challenge myself to purposely not look at her work at all as I started to create my own style, so then I wouldn't be tempted. That was a really long answer, but I hope it helped. Okay. Wonderful. So the next thing that we are going to practice is, I think it would be beneficial if we actually practice the shape of the tulip's head.
Yes.
So I'll move this up a little bit so you guys can see. Now, tulips are really wonderful in the way that there's a bunch of different shapes that can be associated with tulips. Sometimes when they're like still about to bloom or tight, I'm sure there's also different varieties, I'm not familiar enough, but sometimes they're really like tight and closed, and sometimes they're nice and open. So your tulips can go anywhere from like, kind of like a cupped, not a cup shape, but maybe like two C's, or something similar to like a leaf.
I have
Yep.
a question. When
Yes.
you so when you like for the tulips too, when you drop water down first and then put paint in, do you tap off any paint or do you just go straight in and straight in?
Let me see, actually, so if I'm doing my tulip shape like so, and I want to drop paint in, I usually just pick straight up
Okay, gotcha.
and then drop it in.
Because yours bleeds really well, and I was like, oh, no.
But sometimes, so I just drop paint in straight from there, and if it doesn't spread like how you want it to, there's nothing wrong with taking your paintbrush and helping it a little bit.
Okay.
So the only thing I would suggest that way is you don't want to take if you're going for that drop in, wet and wet, hard lines, funky textures, you're not going to want to do this. Because if you swish it back and forth too much, it will even out and you will lose all that shape. So what I would suggest is once you drop it in, you kind of just like leave it. Now another thing so tulips also have like different petals, right? So some petals, like the ones that I've seen, there's kind of like, here's one petal and then here is like another petal. Like that, if this one's kind of opening up a little bit more, and then there's kind of petals going on in the back. And it's the same idea. You just have to think of it as the petals, and you just have to think how much they're blooming. So this shape, they're kind of spread out more, which means that tulip is kind of deeper into its bloom. If you want them tight, it's still those same shapes, but just more tight together. So I'm going to do like a curved line like this, and then another one like this. And that's going to give us more like a tighter feel. And sometimes I'll just do the hint of the back of one. Like, so I'll just do like a little top there. Oh, you okay? So you guys are the ones that get to decide the shape of your tulips. If you have some to look at for reference, that's extremely helpful. I kept all of mine kind of more tightly closed in our project, but it's your painting. So if you want to make yours a little bit bigger or wider or whatever, totally feel free to. It is your painting. Marlene asks, when you're painting alone, do you always do warm-ups with values, or are you doing warm-ups for the classes? So when I'm painting by myself and doing a project, I very rarely go through warm-ups because these are concepts that I'm really familiar with and I use pretty regularly. However, I will sometimes have like a test sheet of paper so I can, if I'm mixing colors, I can test it on like a scrap piece before I lay it down on my painting. That's where I would kind of use a scrap piece of paper when I'm painting my own projects. Okay, so play with that. You can even do a couple different mixtures here. So if you want more of like a peach tulip, you're gonna grab a little bit of that yellow and maybe a little bit of that pink. And it's gonna create like this really soft, like peachy pink color. And really play with how light you can get your tulips. They don't have to be super dark. They don't have to be like a super dark value. They could be, because you've seen tulips that are like that blush color. So really play with that. You can drop in a little hint of pink even after you lay down that peachy color down.
This is a question for Taylor from my little brother in California. He would like to know if you're single.
Oh my gosh.
He's a smooth operator.
Oh my gosh.
Sorry, Johnny.
Johnny Cray, you get out of here. Oh my gosh. Well. That was funny. Okay, so we played with kind of the shape of our tulip head. Now, the next thing that we're just going to go over really quick is the shape of the leaves that we're going to be putting in here. So if we're used to doing leaves, then what we would be used to seeing is maybe something like this, where it has the stem and then there's little leaves going off of it, like so. But tulip leaves, what?
Is your husband's name Kyle?
Yeah.
Is he replying to Johnny?
No. He just said, I'm the husband.
Oh, that is so funny. Okay, So when we're doing leaves for our tulips, they're different in the way that it's not like little leaves off the stem. They go off of the stem. So let's say this is the stem of our tulip right here. They're actually like really thick. They start more at the base and then they kind of narrow out at the point here, like that. So the really wonderful thing about these round brushes that we're using is they have a thick belly and a narrow point at the top, and that allows us to do thin and thick lines in the same brush stroke, just depending on our pressure. So like when we're making these leaf shapes, if you can like outline it, but as you lighten up your pressure, like I'm kind of lifting my brush away from the paper a little bit, my line gets thinner. So pressing hard, I'm gonna get, and I'll actually demonstrate this separately. If I'm taking my round and I'm pressing hard, this is how thick of a line I can get. Or if I'm using just the tip and doing more of a straight up and down hold, I can get a line this thin. And this is why it's so great to work with rounds and watercolor, is because you kind of have to, watercolor is kind of a game in time where you have to do things quickly or not quickly. And so being able to use a brush that's so versatile in the thickness of the lines is super helpful and beneficial. So almost always I'm just using rounds, because I just love that I can use, sometimes I'll use like washes, which are more those like square rectangle brushes and to get even washes and stuff like that. But for the most part, I am using rounds. Okay.
Sarah.
Yeah.
The adoring plebeians, the public, would like to know.
Don't. What?
What are some artists that you love?
Oh. Actually, maybe I'll do a separate post about that. Like I'll share some artwork, because I like talking about their art, and I like talking about what I love about it. And so I think I'll do an Instagram story. You guys, I'm saying this now. Tomorrow, look out in our Instagram and Facebook stories. I will share some of my favorite artists, and I'll mix it up with contemporary ones and ones that have influenced me, like old masters.
I'm going to translate it to a language that us plebeians understand.
Okay.
She says tomorrow, y'all.
Tomorrow, y'all. I'll share that with you. Yeah, those are beautiful. Great job. Yeah, those are really nice. Now, and then these leaves are, you can kind of play with them, because if you want to make the leaves like really structured and straight, you can. Or if you want to have your leaves have a curve in them, like so. See how there's like, this is like a straight line and this kind of curves this way. You can do both, because I've seen both in nature. So there's no right or wrong way. It's whatever works for you. You can see in these ones here that I have both. This one is straight and structured. This one has a curve. So I like to use that to my advantage when I'm making a composition. So if I did all of these straight and structured, kind of going straight up, then that would not be beneficial to my composition, because it would lead the viewer's eye to go straight up off of my paper. However, if we kind of angle our leaves out and they kind of curve and move, so this one's kind of curving in, this one's curving out, this one's curving in, and if we mix it up that way, then it kind of holds our eye a little bit longer composition-wise. We stay in this zone because the lines we're making is kind of almost a circular line. So if these were all angled up, my eye would just go whoop. But because we have a little bit of curve in there, we can kind of manipulate the viewer where we want their eyes to go and to stay in a painting. So that's why I always say, like, while you're painting, take a step back, because when you take a step back from something, you really can get an idea of the composition, and you can see, where am I missing something? Where does it feel empty? Or where is my eye going? And is that distracting? Or do I want my eye to go there? So just kind of play with that. Okay. Let's see if there's anything else.
Marcy says she loves the wisdom pouring forth from your tulips.
Thanks, Marcy. That's a good pun. Okay, I think it's time to get down to business. You guys ready?
Yep.
All right. So you can keep your scratch paper close by if you want to test out colors. Feel free to. Okay, now I gave you guys a pencil because the very first step is we are drawing. And I know that sounds so scary, but hear me out. Don't think of it as drawing. Just think of it as you're making marks on a page. And if you think of it that way, it's just not that intimidating. Because when you think of drawing, you're like, oh, I have to really take a lot of time and like make this perfect and beautiful. It's like, no, you're literally just making a few marks on a page and that's it. And remember, it's just a piece of paper. Don't let that scare you and don't let that stop you from trying something. The worst thing that's gonna happen is you will just rip it off and throw it away. And that's it, and you can just try again. And trust me when I say that people who have been painting a very long time mess up every day. You see the really pretty pictures, but you don't see all the ones that go in the trash can. So don't feel like you're doing something wrong if that's happening to you. Everybody does that. Okay. So we're going to draw our jar first, and I realize that it's helpful to draw a jar because when I was painting this project, I honestly went through 8 sheets of papers just doing jars because I kept on messing up the placement. And my problem that I was doing is I was painting my jar too high. So if you do the bottom of your jar like here, and I'll just do it to show you, if you do the bottom of your jar like this way and you like draw your jar out, there is no room for your tulips to go. That's way too close to the top of the paper. So when you're drawing your jar, start like near the bottom. Like I would say maybe an inch from the bottom. Is that an inch? Maybe half an inch, 3/4 of an inch. Maybe I need a ruler up here.
Question.
Yes.
So I practiced this last night.
Okay.
And I found at the end of it, my jar was like so tiny compared to my.
Yes.
So what is like a good width?
Okay, that is an excellent question because I noticed that some people were struggling with that too. So what I would suggest is when you do your jar, after you do your jar, then I think that we should kind of draw in our flowers. Just really softly our tulip heads because the ratio to size from tulip head to jar matters. So we're going to start with our jar. Now, when you do the bottom of your jar, make sure it's curved. You do not want a straight line to go totally across because jars are round, right? And because it has form, while it's sitting flat on a table, it's going to have a curved bottom. If this jar was square, then it would be a straight line. Or if it was a cube, it would be a straight line. But because it is a cylinder, it's going to be curved at the bottom. So I have erasers here if you guys need an eraser, I have this here. So I like to kind of start with the curve of the bottom of my jar. Try and center it on your paper. However, a little trick I want to tell you guys is this is 9x12 paper. And it's really hard to find 9x12 frames. So I always paint and then trim my paper after. And that way, if it's a little off center, you can just center it again by trimming the edge of one side. So don't get too stressed out about that. So I'm going to, or another thing that's helpful is you find the middle of your paper, you make a dot there, and then you know that the jar needs to be even on both sides. Like that. So I'm just going to do the curve, and then I'm going to put my sides in, and I'm just kind of lightly doing these lines.
Some people had noticed that people had written Belle on their jar.
Yes.
How? That's the
really
main question.
cool.
Okay, yeah, so if you're part of our watercolor group on Facebook, Let's Make Art Watercolor, some people have been writing ball and doing like those letters on those jars. And that, first of all, you guys are so brave for doing that and like you're amazing. How I would go about doing it is one thing that you can do is you can find a picture of a jar online, you can print it out, and you can trace it using graphite paper similar to how we do other projects. Because I'm not very good at lettering, I don't think I would freehand that and feel confident that would look exactly like the logo. But when you're doing lettering on a jar, if I'm doing like, I don't even know how it looks, but if I'm doing ball,
Right there. Look at your jar.
well, it has the fruit on it. Oh, there it is.
She's lying. She's great at lettering.
So when you're doing lettering on glass, what you're essentially painting is just the shadow that the indent makes. So if you feel a mason jar, you can feel the lettering that pops out. So you're not just outlining the words, all you're doing is creating the shadow that the different surface makes on the glass. So because the ball stands out, and depending on where the light is, there's going to be a strong shadow underneath here, there's a strong shadow underneath here, and you're kind of more outlining the letters using a slightly darker value, and that's how you do that lettering on the jar. It is very difficult, so if you guys are brave enough to try it, good for you. Like, so happy for you, because that's really hard. I don't know if I would feel comfortable freehanding something like that, so it would just take a lot of effort because my lettering is not the best, but yet I'm working on it. We have a girl. I'm taking lessons through a company called Let's Make Art. It's really great.
And if you guys haven't seen Nicole's videos, she is a peach.
She is such a peach. I love her so much. Okay, so I did the sides of my jar, and then when you get to the top part, you're going to kind of curve the top a little bit. So it's kind of like curved, because if you look at a jar, it kind of like curves up. And there's a ton of different kinds of jars out there, so you can decide how you want the mouth of your jar to be. Some of them are narrow, some of them are wide. There's no wrong way, whatever works for you. So I'm kind of curving mine up, like so. And then the rings on my mouth, I kind of do 3. I do one where it meets the jar, I do one in the middle, that's like one of those twist-on rings, and then it's like the actual top of the jar.
I'm sorry to stop you again.
No,
but the Facebook people can't see the YouTube comments, so I feel like I'm obligated to say it.
Okay.
Someone posted a ball jar outline on the Facebook group that you can print and use.
Yes.
Oh, nice.
Thank you, whoever did that. So, yeah, you guys can totally do those kinds of things. Super helpful. Now, as you're drawing, this is where it's so great to decide, like, is this the width I want my jar? So if you want it wider, go ahead and make those changes. If you want it narrower, make those changes. Now we're gonna put in our flowers. So this is just like a really soft outline. I'm gonna actually take my kneaded eraser and just kind of softly go over my pencil lines, because you will see the pencil lines through the painting. So I'm just giving myself a really soft hint. Now, when you're doing your tulip heads, and I can measure this out for you guys so you have a better understanding of how big they are. My tulip heads are roughly 1/3 of the size of my jar. So if you were to split your jar up into thirds, 1, 2, 3, that is creating about 1-inch tulip heads. So I know that my tulip heads are gonna be about this big. So if that's, like, sometimes I'll just use my actual fingers and be like, okay, that's roughly 1/3. And then I'll just kind of go in and I'll be like, okay, there's a tulip head. Maybe I'll put a tulip head there. So if you want to, like, softly just like pencil just some shapes in, some round shapes, and then you can decide for you, does this look too small compared to my jar or too big? Because sometimes what happens is while we're painting, we're not paying attention to how things, the size are, like the relative of it. The proportions, thank you. So if you go in and your tulips heads are this big, like that's gonna feel really small. Like you're gonna be like, man, that jar is huge, right? So you have to kind of pay attention to the proportions of things next to each other. Somebody said it looks like the top of your jar is more than halfway up. It is a little bit more than halfway up, but I feel confident that I'll be able to fit my leaves and tulips in here. And if you're looking at the reference photo, the top of my jar is more than halfway up on the reference photo, I think. Yeah, just a little bit.
Can you come down a bit with your paper?
Is that better?
The whole painting book.
Yeah,
A little bit more.
I moved it.
Sorry, it's such a delay.
It is a delay.
You sweet sugary woman, what kind of pencil is that?
This is a Faber-Castell Jumbo 8B. If you're doing this, I would suggest using, I just don't have it here, use a watercolor pencil. If you use a watercolor pencil, then as soon as the water hits these lines, it will blend out. So if you have a gray watercolor or like a tan, or maybe like you can even match the colors where your watercolor pencil is blue on the jar and pink on the flowers. Use that, and then that way you're not gonna have hard lines in your painting. I actually just don't care if pencil lines show up a little bit in my painting, so I'm not too worried about it. But if it really bothers you, then try and get a watercolor pencil, and then those lines will just blend out.
When you just explained the little ball jar sketch, was
Yeah.
that on the thing you're doing now and you erased it? Or do you have it?
I'm not gonna do the lettering on the jar.
I know, but
Okay.
they wanted to see it up close, but if it's gone, it's in the past.
Sorry, it's gone, you guys. It's gone. But just pay attention to the shadows that those ridges are making on the glass, and that's how you're gonna portray the letters. Okay, step one. I feel good about step one. I'm gonna just like put these, I'll darken my outline so you guys can see what I'm doing a little bit better. This is like the 5th one I've painted of these, so it's okay if this one has dark pencil marks.
There's a little Connecticut love group happening on Facebook. Turns out there's a lot of Connecticut llamas.
Oh, welcome.
Okay, so I have to explain something. I work for a company that is also in Hamilton, and we refer to the Let's Make Art people as llamas, because when you say LMA really fast, it turns into llama. So we refer to all of you as llamas now, just FYI.
So you guys are llamas without knowing it. So I've actually been thinking about making a llama shirt. It's just a shirt with a llama head, and that's it.
So you could run into someone at the airport
So
and
if
be like,
you see someone with
"You
a llama
too."
shirt, you'll be like, yes. You guys are all llamas, just so you know. Okay, and one thing I want you guys to notice, I did my sketch really hard so you guys can see. Hopefully yours isn't as dark, but I'm not too worried about making a strong outline, as in some of these edges are not connected. That's okay. This sketch is just to give you a rough idea of where things go. So don't feel like you have to draw it out perfectly first and then color it in. That's not what we're doing. So here are my darker pencil lines so you guys can see, and I'm just gonna leave those there. And yeah, try and make it as light as you can on your painting, but I think it's helpful if I keep this nice and dark for you. So.
They said they're crayfish, not llamas.
You guys are so great. Okay, that was step one. That's really the hardest part and probably the most stressful part. So you guys, good job. You pulled through, and now we're gonna move on to step two. We're gonna paint the actual jar. So I want you to grab a clean cup of water if you have one nearby. And the reason why we want clean water for this is because we're gonna do a really light value. We're gonna kind of like do our jar in this value range. And if we have muddy water, it's going to actually change the color of this light value. So when you're doing really light washes, you wanna make sure that you have cleanish or clean water so it doesn't like dilute the color you're trying to put down. Okay.
I made a mistake. We have 100,000 comments about wanting llama shirts.
Now I'm just, every day they're gonna be like, Sarah, where's my
Where's the
llama
llama
shirt?
shirt?
And I'm really like, I'm sorry. Okay.
Susan, a real crayfish looks like a tiny lobster. They live in the river.
Oh, okay. Was she asking what a, okay. I thought you were telling me. And I was like, I know that. Okay, so I'm grabbing my round 6. I'm going to grab a tiny bit of blue and bring it to the middle of my tray. And then I kind of want my jar to have, if you want to have a more greenish color, add a little bit of yellow. If you want it to stay just that like blue, you can just use light blue. Totally up to you, but we kind of mix our own colors in here, and I know that might be stressful to some, but mixing your own colors is like such a joy, because one, no one else is really gonna be able to replicate it. It's gonna be different every single time, and it's so unique to you. And if you can learn how colors work, then it makes things so much easier, because if you're like trying to paint something and you're like, man, this is too green, how do I tone this down? Well, if you're familiar with colors, you know, if you add a little bit of red in there, it automatically tones down the green. It's so amazing. So don't be afraid of mixing. I mix all of my colors, and you just get color depth with it. It's so great. Sorry, I was talking a lot. Okay. Oh, Mom, you mixed this really gorgeous color. Thank you for that. Yep. Okay, so I'm making sure I'm using a lot of water. So I picked up some color, and then I actually dipped my brush back into my water and hit it off the edge. So I know I'm getting a really light value. And then I'm going to start putting this color in. Now, what I like to do is I like to drop the color in and then just use water to spread it. And you guys can see that this is a super, super light color. And that's what we want. And I am going to focus more on adding color on the bottom and the sides of my jar.
While you're painting, I'm going to go ahead and condense all the comments into one.
Okay.
We need a shirt.
Okay.
It's a crayfish and a floral crown.
Okay.
With a paintbrush like a gun. Riding a llama valiantly, triumphantly into the sunset.
You guys are geniuses. That sounds amazing.
That's all 1,000 comments.
That's all of it combined. Why a paintbrush? How would you do a paintbrush like a gun? Oh, like this?
Like victory!
Victory!
It could be a spear.
Or a spear.
I added the weapon.
Oh, okay. I'm like,
and
wow,
the crayfish riding the
that's
llama.
really
okay,
aggressive.
I made it up.
You're like, I made it all up.
I made it all
what
up.
What if I honestly made that shirt and then I was so excited and nobody bought it? And I'd be like, I don't understand. Okay. Okay, so I'm kind of putting my my color in. Now, what I want you guys to do is I do not want you to fill up the entire jar with color. There are going to be some sections in this jar that have no painting on it at all. We're leaving them totally white. So if you're looking at your reference photo here, you'll notice that right here in the center, that's just white. And like down here, that's mostly white too. So kind of more on the center of my jar and a little bit on the side, it's a really light value or just white. And then I'm kind of just softly putting in colors around the edges. Now, a little trick for you guys, and this might be hard since I have such a hard outline, but if you're putting color in and you miss a corner and there's no color in the corner of your jar or on the sides of your jar, that is going to change the shape of your jar and it's going to make it look lopsided. So if you watch the pre-recorded, you'll actually notice that my jar looked uneven because there was just a corner or a side that I did not fill in. And once I filled it in, it felt even again. So if you're looking at it, and maybe I'll do it in this corner. So if I darken this corner up here, like so, and I don't do anything with this corner, it feels a little bit lopsided, especially if I try and erase this. Let's see if I can erase this line so you guys can see what I'm talking about. So because it's kind of so light on that side, this jar feels a little bit wonky. So just kind of pay attention to putting those little edges and sides in, and that way your jar will feel even. Very nice. Very nice. Beautiful. Good job, you guys. Okay, now I'm gonna do the lips of the lids. What is this?
The rim.
The rim, thank you. This one is going to be slightly darker in value. So I'm going to just kind of softly kind of outline it, do the second one. And then I like to just take out color and just kind of blend them a little bit. So you don't have to do a really hard line across each one. You can just do hints of lines. Because if you're looking at a glass jar and you're looking at the rim of it and you're paying attention to the different lights, and I wish you guys can see exactly what I'm seeing so you can explain it, but if you actually follow the rim on the jar, parts of it look darker than others, and that is because how the light is hitting it. So it's not going to be a strong, straight, dark line. It's going to have light hitting it differently, so some parts of it are going to be darker and some parts are going to be lighter. Now the other thing I want you guys to kind of keep in mind is the curve of the bottom of your jar is going to be really similar to the curve of the top of your jar. And that's because both of them are circle. The top has a circle, which is the opening, and the bottom has a circle, which is the bottom of the jar. And depending on the curve is the angle that we're looking at it. So they should match up. For example, and I will show you guys this. If I do the bottom of my jar, let me make sure you guys can see. Oh, I got paint on that. That's okay. If this is the curve of the bottom of my jar, then I want the top of my jar to be that same curve angle. If I go in hot like this as the top of my jar, these perspectives don't match up. So usually this curve is very similar to this top curve and also the curve of your water. And it's just making sure that those perspectives match up. So if I were to do it one more time, that's the curve. This is the curve of my, oh, that got off center. Okay, and then when I do my water, I'm not gonna like do this and have that be the top of my water because these perspectives don't match. Okay? So that's just a little hint for you guys to look out for when you're painting rounded things with different curves going on. I hope that was helpful. I love the color. You guys did so good on your jars. They're so soft. Gorgeous. Good job. That was step 2. Wonderful. Now we're going to move on to step 3. We're going to do our tulip heads. This is where we get to have fun, you guys. We're going to do that wet on wet technique. So get some water. And I'm going to leave my outlines there because I'm just going to have pencils in mine and I'm fine with that. So what I like to do is I am going to start with, and you can start anywhere on your jar. I'm going to start with this one on the left-hand side. I'm going to fill it with water first. So it's kind of like this football shape. That's what somebody said. Similar to a football shape, maybe not as sharp on the corners. And while it's wet, I'm going to take some of my fuchsia and I'm just going to drop it in. And I'm going to focus on having color kind of more on one side or maybe just the top and maybe just the bottom. But the point is you want somewhere on your flower where it's a lighter value. That's beautiful. Very nice. And so if you want to like, can I paint on yours?
Yeah.
Just softly put that side in so you give it a full shape, okay. But leave that there.
Okay.
Very nice. And then the really wonderful thing that you can do with watercolors, you can change the shape of things as you go. So if you didn't like the shape of this tulip and you're like, man, I really feel like it needs to be a little bit rounder at the bottom, well then just go in and round it out a little bit. Nothing wrong with making those changes after you lay down the color. It's allowed. You can make adjustments as you go all the time. Blakelyn asked if we painted in the water yet. We did not. We do that in step 5 and we're on step 3. So there's my first tulip head and I'm going to put in a second tulip. I'm going to do this one as more like a really soft pink with a little bit of peach because I like color variation within my flowers. If you want to make them all the same color, go for it. This is your painting. You are the artist. You get to decide. So I'm going to grab a little bit of my fuchsia. I'm going to grab a tiny bit of my yellow. And then I'm going to add some water to it. Now remember, really embrace the different values that you can get in a painting. So I'm going to put my second tulip in, and this is a really soft peach color. I love it so much. Just like that. And you'll notice that I don't have them on the same level. So I lowered it a little bit. It's important when you're painting these things that you don't have them like right next to each other across the thing, because that is going to create an implied line in your composition, and we don't want that. If we do it just straight across like this, then our eye is automatically going to be like right off. So you kind of want to stagger it, and that's going to create variation, and it's going to make our eye go across the composition, up and down, back and forth, and that's what we want. We want people to stay in our painting. And then while it's still like wet, I didn't put any paint in the middle, so some of my flowers, I just leave white spaces in them too. That's okay. That's beautiful, Mom. You can even do little tips, like I like to drop in sometimes a hint of pink maybe at the top, because if you look at flowers, there are hints of other colors within those same petals all of the time. They're not all one color straight through most of the time. So if you want to do little hints of other colors, maybe a pop of yellow, feel free to, because I promise you that somewhere it exists. And even if it doesn't, this is your world you're painting, so you get to decide that. That's the fun thing about art. So I just dropped in a little bit of yellow in there too, because why not? Okay.
Be careful not to have too much fun. It's been made apparent to us by Kimberly Jennery that the art police are out and about tonight.
Oh, yeah?
Yeah. I'm guessing it's the end of the month. They got quotas to fill. So just
our police is like,
paint, no smiling, please.
No, this is very serious. You can't mess up. Only if you were born this way can you paint. No. Come and get me, art police. I'm breaking all the rules. Okay. So, the next flower we're going to do, I'm actually going to mix a little bit of purple in this one. I'm gonna, and by purple, I mean I'm gonna take my fuchsia, I'm gonna grab a tiny bit of blue, mix that in there, and it's gonna make this really gorgeous purple. Now, if you want more of a pink purple, make sure you have more of the fuchsia. If you want more of a blue purple, have more of the blue. Elizabeth asks, what kind of paints do you recommend? Well, Elizabeth, that is a very personal preference. So, there's different types of paint. I have a beginner series where I go over supplies and different types of paint. That's on our YouTube, so if you want to take a look at that. Because there are a lot of different brands and a lot of different kinds, and it's just whatever you prefer. I prefer using liquid watercolors because I feel like they're easier to blend. They get really cool textures, and the colors are so vibrant. However, they're not light fast, which means they will fade over time. As an illustrator, that doesn't bother me because I scan my work, I make prints of it. I don't need my originals to stay exactly like the originals for years. So that's why I like working with them, but that might not be your preference, and that is totally okay. Do what works for you. Do what you prefer to do, and there's no bad or wrong, and don't let people tell you that it's bad and wrong. Just do what you want to do. That's all I have to say about
Taylor,
that.
I have another non-dating marriage question for you. Sweet Casey Davis, our Australian friend, wanted to order. You work in the shipping department?
She's our customer service.
Yeah.
It's not for you. Maybe it's for you. Maybe it's for you.
Okay.
What?
This sweet Australian woman would like to order a kit, but it's $60 to ship to Australia. Does it go off weight? Do you know?
It goes off weight and location.
Casey, it goes off weight and location. Y'all?
However, somebody mentioned during a live that we can apply for, I can't remember what
That's
it was
like the
called.
NATO treaty. That's for like South American countries.
Is that what it is?
Yeah.
Oh. Well, never mind then.
Okay, Casey, I have an idea. You fly me and Sarah to Australia. I will bring you every kit we have. I'll bring you 2. So hit me up.
What we did just start to do is we now have on our website for some of our kits, because we're testing it, we have paper only kits, because some people like to use their own paints and they have a lot of paints, but they still want the step-by-step sheet, they still want the outline, they still want the reference photo. So I'll announce which kits they are tomorrow so you'll know. But you can start ordering just paper kits, and that way you can use your own paints. And then what I would like to test, but I just don't know when we'll be able to make those available, is I would like to make just PDFs of the step outs and the reference photos on our website, probably for a minimal fee. And then that way, if you are international, you can support us. You can, buy those PDFs, print them, and that way you have all the education material that we all have in the kits, and you're not missing out, and you don't have to pay shipping. So that's something we're working on. Okay, so I'm moving on to my next flower. I'm gonna put water down first. And you can see that this has a color to it. That's okay. I'm not mad about it, because I'm gonna put purple on there anyway. So I'm just gonna let that color be. Now I just did what I told you guys not to do, which is I put them next to each other on the same level. And I'm just not gonna get mad about that, and I'm just gonna move on. I don't think it's gonna be that distracting. As long as it's only happening here, I don't think it will be an issue. So if you do something like that, don't let that stop you. Don't think that you messed up, just keep on going. Because as we add the leaves, it won't be as obvious. It's only really obvious if it's like all of them in a straight row.
Real quick, someone's curious about the white, bleed-proof white, because it's not liquidy. How do you use that?
Bleed-proof white is a gorgeous stream that I love so much. So bleed-proof white, if you buy it from us in the jars, it's Dr. P.H. Martin's bleed-proof white. It's creamy. It's really thick. How I use it is most of the time I use it for highlights. For example, if I'm drawing an animal and I painted over an area that I wanted to keep white, then I will actually just add a little bit of water to my paintbrush, grab a little bit of that paint, and just kind of spot paint with it. So the bleed-proof white is not meant for mixing to make different colors. I have done that before, but usually what I use it for is highlighter, if I'm trying to cover a mistake, if I'm trying to do stars, if I just want like white areas that are clean white, that's what I use the bleed-proof white for. Okay.
Also, an update, Casey says pack our bags.
We're coming. Australia, here we come. Okay, so I just did my third flower. Okay, now I'm going to do another one. I'm going to have it kind of coming up this way, like over top. And this one I'm going to have more of a bluish purple, so I'm going to just mix a little bit more of my azure in with my fuchsia. And you guys get to decide exactly what that color looks like. Play with it.
Patricia says that she had a daughter in Africa and they would send things as educational materials and they were way cheaper.
Yes, we try that because this is educational materials, but what we have found is because sometimes post offices will open those boxes up if they don't believe they're actually educational materials, and then they'll just not mail them to our customer. Or they will charge our customer the difference between the educational material mailing price and the standard price. So we have tried that because this is educational materials that we are mailing. However, we've learned that post offices don't believe us. So we've had to like not do that anymore because our customers weren't getting their things. And you can't be mad at the post office. They're thinking that they're doing their job, and that's fine. But this is education, you guys. We're learning. Okay.
I'm being real chatty in the comments.
I love it.
I'm just apologizing
I
to
just,
everyone in
I
advance.
just think you're so great.
Someone just said, my 7-year-old wanted to say thank you for your class. And I said, Miriam, go ahead and tell your 7-year-old that they're wonderful. I've just been chatting everyone up.
Your 7-year-old is wonderful. Oh, someone, gosh, I missed someone who came into the store a couple of weeks ago. She wrote me a little note. I need to do a little video and say thank you. If you're watching, thank you for leaving me that darling thank you watercolor note that you painted. It was so great. Okay, so we did our tulip heads. Now we're gonna move on to step 4. We're gonna do our stems and our leaves. So think back to the warm up where we kind of created the shapes of our stems, and keep in mind that you kind of want to change. You can keep them rigid, you can have them curved. Just try not to have them super rigid straight up all the way through. We don't want that for our composition. So, and you can do the same technique, that same wet on wet technique that we did with our flowers. So if you just want to take water and create your leaf shape, I'm going to start over here. I have my little leaf, it's coming out of the mouth of my jar. I'm gonna grab green and I'm just gonna drop that color in, and it's just gonna spread. And it's gonna do really cool textures, and it makes me just love watercolor over again all the time. Now, for me personally, like, very rarely do I only use green straight out of the tube. No matter what type of green it is, what shade, I usually always mix it with blues, yellows, or browns, or blacks to get different variation within my greens. Because most of the time, the green that we get out of the tube is too saturated for what we might see in nature. And also in nature, there are hints of blues and yellows and stuff within our greens. So while it's still wet, don't be afraid to take some yellow and just drop it straight in there, or a little bit of blue. Just like that. Very nice. Yes, very nice.
People are requesting a break for unnamed reasons, probably bathroom. Can we have a check-in?
Yeah, let's do a check-in. We're going to do a check-in where I'm going to go
Heidi,
through people's paintings.
that was for you. You do your thing.
If you got to clean your water, go clean your water. I'm going to look at their paintings, and maybe you guys can look at them too, and you can see how everybody's doing. So, this is my mom's painting, and I love the lightness and softness of her jar. I think it's really lovely, and I love the different shapes of her tulips and the variation that she got within here. Her leaves are looking really good. What I would suggest also is when you're doing these leaves, let me put this down so people can see it a little bit better. This is all still pretty similar thickness, which is fine, but on some of them, let some of this wide part get just a little bit wider. Just a little bit, and then that's really gonna accentuate. So if you're looking here, it's kind of really wide here, and then it narrows to a point where yours is staying pretty similar. It does narrow off, but it's kind of more of that, a very similar thickness. So maybe thicken it just a little bit. And then the other thing that I would suggest is, and this is really important, so you guys look at your painting if this is happening too. As you're painting, you're going to be creating different values, and as you put in those different values, they're going to inform the other part of your painting. So your tulips are really gorgeous and dark, but now it seems like your jar is almost maybe a little bit too light because of how dark your tulips and your leaves are. So I wouldn't say you have to paint over this totally, but maybe like in the corners, and maybe you can see this a little bit here. Sorry, I did that. Is there some areas where it's just a little bit darker in value? So I would maybe do another little run of wash of that blue, maybe just on this corner or maybe on this corner, and then that way it's going to even out the values a little bit more, so they feel like they belong in the same world. That's the whole point of the values being relative to each other, is we want them to feel like they belong together. Okay?
Yep. Thank
you.
Very nice. Okay, we have Taylor's.
The jar definitely needs to be dark.
But you guys did exactly what I said. I asked you to make your jar really light, and then I told you to go crazy on color. So that was my bad. You guys are doing really awesome. I love the color variation and I like to call them like burns, but I think the technical term is blooms, like these kind of hard lines right there. Gorgeous. You really just left it alone and let it be. And then you get these really great textures in there that are like accidental and amazing. And this is why watercolor is the best. So honestly, probably the same thing. Maybe darken up a couple areas of your jar just a little bit so it feels a little bit more in line with what's happening with our flowers. And also, I know this is your first leaf, so maybe it's not fair for me to save this yet, but make sure you have some long ones in there too. If all of your leaves are about this size, then your leaves are going to feel too short in proportion compared to your flowers in your jar.
Okay.
Okay? But it's looking really great.
Thank you.
All right. Helen's on, and she's saying that she loves it. Helen's head of our customer support, and she's just a dream. Honestly, our customer service team is like, you guys are the best. I just love you guys so much. They do such a good job.
Sarah,
You're the best, Taylor.
You know, in Washington, California, where we met,
Yeah.
the little city right outside it called Nevada City,
Yeah.
Peggy's from there.
No!
Yeah.
Peggy, I met my husband right there. Washington, California. We go camping there all the time. And you are from a very small place, right? Isn't Nevada City?
Yeah.
Yes. But I'm there too. Hamilton's only 1,800 people, so I feel ya.
Marcy says she's back. We can start again.
Oh, good. Okay. Yeah, very nice. And then softly blend it out. Very good. You don't need to go across the entire thing like I like how light this is.
Right,
But
okay.
yeah, you're doing it. You're doing it.
There's a huge debate about the number of flowers that should be in here, and it turns out it should be odd.
Okay, yeah. So if you're putting in flowers, if you look at mine, I actually have 5 flowers going on. I only did 4 because this back one I put in after I do the leaves. But when you're doing composition things, usually it's more aesthetically pleasing if you work in odd numbers. However, I would like to say that sometimes the composition calls for even numbers. Don't force it if it doesn't feel natural. So if you are keeping it in mind, then do odd numbers. But if you have 4 flowers and you can't figure out a place to put a flower that will fit, and you're like stressing because you're like, but I have to have 5 instead of 4. No, you don't. No, you don't. Sometimes you can break those rules if it is for the composition. But yes, they're right. Usually odds are more aesthetically pleasing. I don't know why that is. Michael, do you know why that is? I feel like you have a knowledge of random things like
Science.
that. Science. That's what. Okay. I hope you guys are back. We're going to keep moving on with our leaves. Yes. Yeah. Very nice.
How's the jar?
Very nice. Yeah. I would blend it out maybe a little bit more, but that's looking good. Yes. Uh-huh. Uh-huh. So good.
What about the sides of the jar? Those, like, as far as darkening mine up, like.
I would maybe just, can I paint on this?
Yeah.
Is that okay? So if you guys saw Taylor, she darkened up this corner a little bit more, which I think is looking really nice. I'm going to blend this out. I'm going to go along the side a little bit, like that. And just kind of, I'm just going to mess up the inside just a little bit because now we don't want it to be like a spotlight on the jar.
Yeah.
But we didn't want to leave the sides totally alone because if we did, then it might change the actual shape of our jar. Like kind of what I was talking about in the beginning, just by leaving it a lighter space, it might make our jar feel a little bit wonky. But it's looking really good, and that color is so beautiful. I love that turquoise color. Okay. So just keep on going with your leaves. Really mix those greens with those blues and those yellows and get variation in your green color. It's gonna add interest and depth to your painting. So I did one that was mostly green and yellow. Let's grab a mostly blue-green next and put that in there. And I'm working around my flowers. So I'm kind of leaving a little bit of white space between my flowers and my leaves. Because this is more of an illustration, so I'm not gonna like, and I don't want the colors to bleed together, so I'm just gonna leave a thin line in between. And then you can also put in your stems too. So your stems are just going to be thin lines that lead up to the middle of your bud on your flower. And we're doing the leaves and the stems simultaneously, so you can put them in now or you can put them in after. But you just, if you want to use your round 2, if it's easier for you to get a thin line that way, you can. Or you can use your round 6 and just do a vertical hold, light pressure, and you'll get a nice thin line. Like so.
Someone said that their yellow is bleeding out of green, and they said help, 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 and I just said paper towel.
I guess I'm not sure what they mean.
Yellow is bleeding from my green. Help,
Yellow is bleeding from my green. Well, when you drop in the yellow, it is gonna like move across. But like those textures are okay. I think I would need to see what they're doing in order to help them. I'm so sorry.
Okay, so how I just dropped in green right there, how it looks yellow when it gets lighter. Is that what she means? Maybe?
I don't know.
Our next sweet Australian friend, Jill,
Yes.
says that she would love a window tutorial.
Ooh.
Like maybe some flowers through a window, or
Okay.
Michael galloping on a horse through a window. Michael carrying a crayfish
Michael
with a
carrying on a llama. Michael on a llama with the crayfish. The fish is holding the paintbrush.
Shirtless with Putin.
Okay. Now, as you're putting in some of your leaves, we're paying attention to the colors, and I also want you to pay attention to the values. So if you notice, these are more darker value leaves. I'm going to put some leaves in here that are a lighter value and mix it up. Usually the ones in the back are going to be lighter. And the reason for that is that's how we just kind of put a hint to give the viewer an idea that there is space, is by pushing it back a little bit. And by pushing things back, you can make them lighter in value. So really play with those different, so we're paying attention to 2 things, value and color. You want variation in both while you're doing these leaves. And for me, the reason why I like that is because I think it just makes the painting more interesting to look at. I mean, yes, if you saw tulips in a bunch together, mostly their greens are going to be really similar, but it's like sometimes you just want to have fun with color, and sometimes you just want to, you know, like put some personality to it because it's not like a photograph.
We have some botanical anatomists chiming in.
Oh, good. Okay.
Turns out that tulip stems are not that thin.
Okay. They're thicker.
They're thick.
Okay.
Like a milkshake.
Oh, thick. Thick.
That's a thick stem.
So tulip stems are thicker. I'm just a fan of thin stems. Personally, that's my watercolor style. So for me, I'm just going to say like, it's my painting. I'm going to do whatever I want. But if you want to make yours thick and be more correct towards tulips, please do that. Please do what's going to be good for you. That actually reminds me of one time, my husband, he graduated with a degree in biology, and his best friend is a botanist. Is that right?
Sweet Eric.
So Eric, he's a botanist. He's all into plants. And I did a peonies, and he messaged me. He was like, "Hey, I don't mean to be insulting, but that's the wrong leaf on the flower. They look more like this." I was like, "Oh, thanks, Eric." He was so nice.
Good night, Lena Holly's daughter. Go to bed.
Good night.
I'm going to guess her name is Moonflower.
Moonflower.
Good night, Moonflower.
That's our daughter's name. Just kidding, it's not. Well, kind of. It's Luna. Moon. Similar. Okay, I'm going to keep going on these leaves. I'm working my way through across. and I'm working my way around flowers. I'm not painting over the flowers because this is watercolor, it's not acrylic. If you paint over something, you're still gonna see what's underneath through it. So it's really hard to paint over things on here like you can in acrylic or oil. Now, another thing that I want you guys to not stress about is we have a lot of different leaves going on here and we have a lot of different stems going on here. They're all coming out of the mouth of this jar, but don't feel like the stem at the top has to match up with the stem coming out of the mouth of the jar. If we were doing a more photorealistic painting, then I would have you guys pay attention to that. But because we have like tulips heads in the way, and this is kind of more of an illustrative style anyway, don't stress about making sure that the bottom of this stem matches, or this leaf matches the top of that leaf. Because there's so much going on, it's so condensed that you probably wouldn't be able to match it up anyway, so don't stress about that.
Well, I just realized that I'm making my leaves way too big.
That's okay. That's okay. You went all the way to the edge of your paper. So actually what you can do, so this is what my mom's talking about. So usually when you're painting something, you want to leave about like a finger's width away from the edge, because then automatically it's going to give us a feeling of anxiety to have something so close to the edge. But what you can do is you can paint the ground on this jar that goes to the edge of this paper, and so then it doesn't feel like it's just pushed up wrong on the composition. Does that make sense? Okay. Or you can just trim this off.
That's what I'll do.
So,
now would you add in flowers to lengthen it?
Yeah, so what I would do is I would maybe do a couple of leaves here. And then if you want to do like a really light bud over here, you can, to kind of like match the height. Now, don't feel like that your height has to match is where all of the leaves have to go out to this radius. Okay. It doesn't need to do that, but some of them need to. Okay. And then some of them can be short.
Okay, thank you.
Now, a really other fun thing that you can do is if you have like a strong area of color, a technique that I like to do is I like to drop in just water, and I'm gonna get these really cool textures on my painting. And I love doing it on leaves because most of the time on leaves, you have like this large area of space that you can kind of play with. I mean, people know that it's a leaf, so who cares if there's like these blooms and different colors going on. They're really easy to identify, so it gives you freedom to play with them. That's how I view them anyway. Now I'm going to do a couple of background leaves, and I'm going to get more of like a bluish color and add a lot of water to it. And if you kind of want to like take your green and brown it up, grab a little bit of that fuchsia and mix it in with your green, and it will automatically give it more of a brown color, which is really cool, I think. And I'm going to put in a couple . Cheryl says she's in Arizona and her paints keep on drying on the pan. That's okay. These paints can be reconstituted, and sometimes as you're painting, they're going to dry if you haven't touched them in a while. Just add a little bit of water to them and they'll come right back up. So it's okay if they dry a little bit while you're painting. That happens to me. Now, oh, Michael, did you answer that question even before you're so on top of it.
I told you I'm chatty in the comments today.
You're so great.
I've got a box of big Cheez-Its and an RC Cola.
And you're just having a
blast. And I'm
blast.
just talking to all the Let's Make Art fans.
All the llamas / crayfish. Okay, now one thing I'm going to add right now over here in this area is the top of another tulip head, but I'm going to make sure it's really light in value. And this is a trick that I like to use, is when I'm painting a composition and an area feels bare, what I like to do is I will fill that area with a light valued thing, and then that way it fills the space, but it doesn't create weight to the painting, and it doesn't create a focal point if I don't want it to be. So if I did a really dark flower right here, that would actually throw off my entire composition. It would feel very heavy on this side, but I still need to fill that space a little bit. So if you grab a really soft light pink. Oh, Stephanie asked me to slow down. I'll slow down, Stephanie. Thanks for telling me.
Hit that sweet pause button.
Hit that sweet. Can they pause alive?
Yeah.
Yes.
Can you really?
Yes.
So,
Oh.
Yeah.
someone on YouTube asked, what is too much water? And I went and got the Wikipedia link for water intoxication when you like die and linked it.
So if you have a good rule of thumb that I've noticed with too much water is if I'm putting my paintbrush on my paper and it is creating a puddle on my paper where a section of the water is just sitting on the paper and it doesn't actually absorb into the paper, that's too much water. Now, if that's happening to you, it's not a big deal. So I'm just gonna do it now, for example, where there's a puddle on my paper. You can take your paper towel, or I'm using this like washcloth for right now, and you can just soak up the excess water. So, and it just takes practice getting the right ratio of water on your brush and paint on your brush. It's a thing that it just takes time. So be kind to yourself and understand that it does take time to learn these different things, so don't get mad. I mean, it took me a lot of practice to understand how watercolors worked. Honestly, my first watercolor class I took probably over 10 years ago now. I was painting watercolor like they were acrylics. I wasn't letting them be transparent. I was using so much color, it was so heavy. And honestly, it wasn't until the very final of that class where we did this still life of like roses and apples and skulls that I finally understood how important it is to treat the water as a paint and not just as a way to clean your brush. So the water is actually part of the medium with this.
If you guys are ever feeling bad about any of your paintings, I just want you to think that I took that class with Sarah, and my final in that class was horrendous. And whatever you're painting looks better than mine did.
Okay, you're being too hard on yourself because your self-portrait I posted on our stories and people loved it.
It was a fluke.
It wasn't a fluke. You're artistic. Okay, so I put in a little soft hint of a tulip head. I probably made it a little bit taller than I needed to, but that's okay. I don't think it's throwing off my composition too much, so I'm not going to worry about it. But I am going to add like a lighter value leaf over here. And then I'm going to do one kind of coming off the sides a little bit more. Oh, I want to show you guys a trick. Michael, do you mind going to the top cam really, or not the top cam, the side cam? I want them to see a close-up of this.
Hold, please. Hit it.
Okay, so you'll see here, this leaf, I'm getting a fuzzy edge. Sometimes that happens when I'm using maybe too much paint because this paint is pretty concentrated. So one thing that you can do to help that if you're running into that issue, can they see that very well? Can they see the fuzzy edge?
Yeah.
Should I I can turn it so people can see it a little bit better. What I do to combat that is I lay my water down first. And then I drop in my strong color. And if you lay your water down first and you don't go outside of that water edge, then that paint will stay within the edge of the water. If you're laying your paint and your water down simultaneously and you have a ton of paint and it's super concentrated, then you can get this fuzzy edge. So if you are running into that problem, don't stress out, it's not you. Just lay water down first and your paint will stay within those water guidelines. Very nice. That's looking so good. How are you doing? Beautiful. Very nice.
It's Linda's 2-month llama anniversary. She can't believe all she's learned.
Linda, thank you for painting
You know,
with
Linda,
us
we
for
were just
2
talking
months.
about you. We're like, I think it's Linda's 2-month.
We're like, Linda has been with us
Watercolor
for 2
anniversary this
months.
month.
We should say something.
We are so happy to have you with us.
We
Linda.
are so happy. You are so great. Okay. I'm going to do one more leaf right over here, and then I'm going to feel good about my leaves. Now, remember, things can be adjusted, and sometimes the best thing to do with a painting is to step away from it. So sometimes even if you feel like you're done, give it a break, walk away, and then come back to it, and you might make some changes. Or you might say, no, it's done, it's right.
Laura Lynn says that her leaves in real life are fuzzy if she doesn't wear her glasses. That's the truth.
You had that problem too.
Yep, I got LASIK.
You did get LASIK.
Best ever.
Do you guys want to hear something funny / sad? Michael, you're like, no. I'm going to tell you anyway. I have a 7-year-old named Ella, and she's so artistic and she loves to paint. And I had her on our very first Let's Make Art Matter postcard video. She was really hard to paint with because I'm her mom. And so even though I'm talking to a camera, she's like, Mom, Mom, Mom. So I didn't have her on for a really long time. And then my mom's in town. And so I thought, like, I'll have Ella come and paint, and then my mom will sit next to her, and that way if Ella needs help, my mom can like help her paint. So I was like so excited because I'm like, you guys will be able to see my daughter, and she's so great and wonderful. And we're getting ready to go, and I was so excited to tell her because she's asked to paint with me a couple of times. And then I was just like, do you want to paint on the show tonight with me? And she's like, yeah, I would love to. And I was like, great. And then she's like, where's Luna? And Luna's my 3-year-old. And I'm like, oh, Luna's going to go to our friend's house. And Ella, my 7-year-old, was like, can I go to the friend's house instead? And I was like, wait, you don't want to paint with me? And she's like, well, I can paint at home with you. I was like, okay, that's fine. So I got stood up by my 7-year-old tonight.
She just doesn't like making you look bad on camera.
She would. She's so great.
Her paintings are just top notch.
But I was so excited, and then she's like, but I want to go play at my friend's house. And I was like, okay, that's fine. No worries, I'm okay. As I like go to a corner and cry because I just want my child to like me. Audra asked when the Lion Live is. So the Lion Live is going to be next Tuesday, a week from today. We release that tutorial tomorrow, and we're going to do the live next Tuesday, which I think is the 23rd, I want to say. Sure, let's go with that. 7:15, we'll be here. Okay, I finished step 4. Now we're going to move on to step 5. We're going to do our water. So essentially with the water, all we're really going to put in is the rim of the water that's kind of going across, and then the top of it a little bit. So I'm going to grab a little bit of my bluish color. Now the only thing is you want to make sure that this is a darker value that you're putting in here. So it's going to match maybe the darkest value on your jar or go a little bit darker, but don't put like a black line across because that won't fit. So remember that the values are relative to each other. So I'm going to take my blue, and if you want to draw it in first, or if you want to use a light color to put it in first, or a light value and then darken it up later, that is an option. So I'm going to decide how high I want my water to go. I'm going to go about halfway, and I'm going to do a very similar curve to the bottom of my jar, like so. And then I'm just going to put a little bit of color on the edges. Now, the edge of my water is not going to go all the way to the very side of my jar. It stops right before. And the reason why it stops right before is because there is a thickness to the glass. So the water actually isn't going all the way to the edge because the glass is there. And the glass has a thickness to it, so we have to like give that a nod. And then I just kind of like wet my brush and kind of blend out. Now, again, think of the same way of the rim as we're doing our water, is it doesn't have to be a hard, thick line across the entire thing. Like in my reference here, I actually have a white space in my line somewhere. So it's okay if it's not a solid line, because how light hits it, it's going to reflect at different parts.
They're recommending that you call your lion tutorial the Dandelion.
My lion tutorial? That's a good idea. Man, that was a missed opportunity. I should have named the project that. Dang you guys, good idea. So the other thing that you want to keep in mind with your water is it narrows out. So the shape of your water, and let me get a scrap paper so you can decide. When you're doing your water shape, and let me get some blue here, is on the edges, your water is going to narrow out. So you're not doing this shape. What you're doing is you're going to do your curve like that, and then the top curve. And that's going to be the top of our water. And because this is showing, again, it's showing the perspective that we're looking at the jar. So if this is my jar here, I'm going to do like a soft little line across, and then just on the edges. So it's going to kind of come to almost a point. But the thing to remember is that it narrows out and it's thicker in the middle. Because like I'm looking at my water cup right now, and I'm looking at the top of the water, and even if you see the more of the top, because I'm looking at it from a different angle, it still narrows on the side. And that's because the cup edge is there.
When you eventually paint a llama, they want you to call it the Dalai Lama.
Okay. Would I get in trouble for that?
No.
No? Okay.
Well, you should spell it like Dolly Parton.
Oh, okay. Give her like a little
like the llama's name
kerchief.
is Dolly. Yeah. And alpacas are much cuter than llamas, but I couldn't pull alpaca out of LMA.
Okay. So that's kind of it. No, you're doing good. You're doing good. Yeah, that looks really nice.
Dandy llama.
What I would just say for yours is I'm just going to lighten this back up a little bit more. So I'm going to get it wet. You can lighten colors. You can't erase colors, but you can lighten colors. So you get it wet. Can I have your paper towel? Take your paper towel. Soak it up, and then if you want to redefine that, you can, or you can leave it like this, because probably yours went a little bit too tall, and that's okay. If you leave it like this, it's not distracting enough for it to be a problem. So I would honestly probably just leave it. But if you run into that problem where you made a mistake and you just kind of want to hide it, put some water on there and just lift up the extra color with your paper towel, and it just won't be as like in your face. So you just kind of hide it. I do things like that all the time. Okay, so can I take yours? Okay, so this is Taylor's, and this is looking really good. The only thing is this is really wet, so we want a little bit of a darker line right where, as that water hits the edge of the jar. That's where it's actually going to be the darkest value, is that bottom curve. But because it's so wet right now, that whatever color you're putting down, it's going to blend out. Yeah. So what I would suggest is wait for this to dry, and then once it's dry, go back in and do your bottom curve again.
Okay.
And then you'll be set. Okay, that is it. For step 5, we're going to move on to step 6, which is the leaves and the stems in the jar. Now, looking at like a real vase with real flowers and stems, it's a little bit more complicated than what I'm about to show you. So I kind of like simplified it a little bit enough so you guys can have a basic understanding of how it works. And then as you guys keep on practicing and improving your skill, then you'll be able to like just look at the jar and be able to do it. But essentially, to communicate that there is something in the glass and outside of the glass is it's just going to be a lighter value. And then that's how we add that extra layer of glass. So when you're doing these leaves, oh, the water curve is called a meniscus. Thank you, Marta. That's what this is, meniscus. Thank you. Okay, sorry, just a little education for you. Okay, so when I do my leaves, I'm gonna put some leaves in here and I'm just gonna make sure that they are a lighter value than the leaves that are on the top. So if you're looking at my example here, I have hints of green. We're just gonna do hints for right now of leaves. We don't have to make them super defined. So we're just gonna take like a light value green and put in a leaf, like the bottom of a leaf, and maybe a couple of stems. So kind of look at where your stems are coming. But remember, there's so much next to each other and connected that things are gonna like overlap a little bit and run into each other, and that's okay. Now, leave a little bit of space between your dark water edge and the bottom of your leaf. The bottom of your leaf is not going to go all the way to the dark edge of your water. There's a little bit of space in between there. And the reason for that is because most of the time the thing is going through the center and it doesn't actually go all the way to the edge. So if your stems and your leaves are in the center of the jar, you need to leave space in between the edge and there because it's in the center. Does that make sense? Say yes.
Yes.
Okay, thanks.
We're concentrating.
Emily says she appreciates me, so I'm going to read her comment. She says, I enjoy what Michael brings to the live paint-alongs. During the octopus night, he named the brushes. Tonight, I've named the llama fans and given tutorials funny names.
You offer so much.
I can't dance very well.
Listen, I just like you a lot, so I'm a little biased, but I appreciate that other people enjoy your company too.
Thank you. Thank you, Sarah. Thank you, Emily. Thank you, Cleveland.
And good night.
And good night.
And you just cut the live right there. You're like, thank you for coming to my show. Very nice. Okay, and we're gonna do one more last bit of that leaves in the jar, which is our leaves and our stems keep on going through the water. So we're gonna have them in the bottom part, the water part, and we're gonna have those even lighter because not only do we have to see them through glass, we also have to see them through water. So these
are we almost done with the practice? Do we start the real one yet?
We haven't started the real thing yet.
Okay, cool.
Can you guys stay for another 2 hours? Is that cool? So it's gonna be even lighter, this like green. So it's just like little hints that these stems and these leaves continue into the water. Now, one thing I'm noticing on mine is because I'm using such a light green, it's almost turning highlighter color, like too saturated of a light green. And if that happens to you, I'm gonna grab a little bit of like peach and I'm just gonna softly go over some of my greens with this like really light peach layer. And if you wanna test it on a scrap before you do this, feel free to. But usually if you do like a complementary color light wash over something and you wanna desaturate it, then it will kinda tone down the brightness of one color. So I just toned my green down a little bit so it wasn't distracting.
This joke comes from YouTube.
I love jokes.
What is the difference between a 2L llama and a 3L llama?
What?
A 3L llama is a really big fire in New York City. 3 alarmer. 3 llama. I don't have a New York accent, but it's so funny.
That's a good one.
To be a llama.
People are so funny.
That's from a separate Emily. Thank you, other Emily. You guys are on my good list tonight. My sister's name is Emily, so you're all doing well.
Okay, now as you guys are putting these in, we're gonna kind of move on to the last step, which is really, and I call it details, but maybe I should name it something else if I'm not actually doing details. But it's like, I want to, yeah, well, it's not finishing touches. It's where you take a step back from your painting and look at it from far away, or give it a break, or take a picture of it and look at it on your phone. Because if there is anything bothering you about color, composition, things like that, this is the part where you can be like, okay, does this feel done? So like, if you're looking at your leaves, like for me, I feel like my leaves feel even. It might be a little heavy on this side, but not so much that it's pulling attention away. So that I feel good about. And then I'm like, okay, let's look at my flowers. Should I drop in any extra colors? Do I want to do a couple little detail lines? Maybe put that in there. And like by detail lines, maybe I'm just taking some like strong color and just kind of like shaping some of these flowers. There's nothing wrong with that. You can like shape some of them a little bit.
Call it introspection.
Introspection?
Or outrospection, because it's not intro, I guess.
It's
just call it spection.
Spection. Brought to you by Michael. And then
Reevaluation.
also take a look at my jar. So I'm looking at my jar and I'm like, you know, the bottom of my jar, I kind of want it to be a little bit more solid. I want it to be a little bit darker. So I'm going to do another little wash of this blue-green color and just do like just a little extra value on this bottom of my jar. Ginger says her daughter Natalie and her love to paint. She can't wait for the live lion. Hello, Ginger and Natalie. Thank you so much for painting. And the lion is going to be so fun. You guys are going to be so surprised at what you can do. It seems like a really intimidating project, but you guys got this. Also, when you're painting something, and I don't really have the luxury of doing this since we're on camera and this is live, but when you're like right over it, you're really in it, and it's harder to actually get an idea of what it looks like because you're so close in it. So if you are at home, I really encourage you to take a step away from it. And honestly, what I did all growing up after I painted something is I would hang it, or I would just set it on the window ledge after it dried or something, and I would walk out of the room and I would just leave it there for a whole day, and just as I walked by I would glance at it, and then you can get a better understanding of color and composition and the entire thing that way. You can really see it when you're farther away from it. So try that if you can. I'm not going to do that here because we don't have time. What if I just like left it up there for like 20 minutes and just walked away? Michael, you would still watch, wouldn't you?
By force.
I have a question.
Yes.
Okay, see how this is, it looks like I took a highlighter and just went so I know the darkening thing, but how do you make it less chunky?
Okay.
Unless it's doomed.
So it's not doomed, but you're just gonna have to make some adjustments because like these aren't reading as stems anymore because of how thick and how they're following the shape of the jar. So what I would suggest to do to kind of help fix that problem is paint on top of it using a different colored green to put those stems in. So if I take a little bit of like a darker green here, I'm just going to kind of desaturate it and lighten it up. Is it okay if I paint on this? Okay. So you're just kind of reshaping this area, and then that green wash is just like, oh, I don't know, there's green reflecting in my jar, or maybe it's a more of a green jar up there. You know what I mean? It's
Yeah.
going to become more part of the jar and maybe a little bit layers of the leaves. And then I really hope it's okay that I'm just going crazy on here. Okay. So you're just kind of reshaping some of these leaves. So they look more like leaves.
Yeah, okay.
And then what you want to, if these yellow edges are still bothering you, wait for it to dry and then do a blue wash over them.
Okay.
And that will tone them down a little bit more. If you do more blue washes on the top though, just watch the bottom part of your jar because you don't want the top part to feel too heavy compared to the bottom.
Okay.
Sarah, I just want to let
Yeah.
you know I'm making tons of friends in these comments.
Yeah.
And I'm planning on starting a company called Let's Make Better Art and stealing all your fans because they like me.
You know what? You go right ahead, honey. I'll run the cameras and I fully support you.
Thank you.
And also I would just love to see you teach painting classes every week.
I don't think I'd have any sticking. I don't think people would stay along for very many months.
Okay. So I'm done with mine. I did all the steps. I took a step back. Now, if there's one thing that I'm also, as I'm looking at this, is my jar is slightly off center. It's kind of more to the left and a little bit more up. And this is where trimming your paper comes in super handy. I would just trim off the bottom a little bit and I would trim off the right side a little bit and then nobody's the wiser, you know? It's really great. Oh yeah, very nice. Putting that edge back in. Beautiful. So, let's show what we painted. Michael, are you ready to do the slow pan across?
Yeah.
Okay.
Okay. Switching cameras. We're going to have a sign that says LMBA, let's make better art. And then no llamas allowed. Okay, who do you want to start with? Kelly?
Well, yeah, let's start with my mom.
No.
So you gotta do it that way so she can see.
Wow, lovely. Up and down pan. This is a professional way to pan. Ask me how I know. They yell that all the time about it. Okay. Sarah's. Starting on the bottom. I can't see your face. Boo.
Oh,
It's looking at
I'm
you.
trying to make faces.
Here, let me get on your face.
Okay, wait, let me do tell me when you're on my face.
Okay, go. Wow. It's so zoomed in. Okay.
Okay.
Okay, Taylor.
So good, you guys.
Good.
Good job.
Wow. Lovely.
Beautiful. Beautiful, beautiful, beautiful. Okay. Sorry, I just saw the replay where I did my... Okay. First of all, if you guys painted this with us, this is an extremely difficult project. Painting water in glass jars is no joke. Also, the composition of florals without an outline, these are complicated things. So don't feel stressed out if you feel overwhelmed or if yours didn't turn out. But you are so brave for doing this. And if you even made it look like a jar with tulips and glass and water, you've succeeded. You've done it. And if you had a good time, you succeeded. If you learned something, you've succeeded. So don't always stress about the outcome because let me tell you, sometimes I paint something and I don't like it, but instead of feeling like I'm not made to do this, I think, how can I use what I've learned to apply it to the next thing? Because sometimes I start painting something and I'm like, whoa, these colors are not working together. And I'm like, that's okay, now I know these colors don't work together, and I move on, not a big deal. What?
300 people have called Kelly Mom so far. They just all say, Mom, yours looks great.
Thank you.
Okay, so if you painted this, share it. I know it's so hard putting your artwork out there. It's so scary because you think people are going to judge it and you think people are going to tell you it's bad. I'm going to tell you that 95% of the time that does not happen. People love it. They celebrate it when people are creative. And it's because we just want to make things. That's just in our nature. And it's brave to put yourself out there, and it gives people permission to be brave also. So if you're on Instagram, tag us in it. Let's Go Make Art is our tag, or you can hashtag Let's Make Art. Those are two different names, and I'm really sorry about that. We're working on it. We also have a Facebook group. We have a business page for our Facebook, so you can go there for general questions, or we have a watercolor group that is so great, and we just share our art. That's all we do. We just share, and that's the way we can learn from each other. Because how fun is it to watch each other paint and see what they come up with for the same project? So that is called Let's Make Art Watercolor if you're interested. I think that's it. Oh, I do have one announcement, which is if you are in the Utah area, specifically around like Lehigh, what's around there? Salt Lake City, Draper, that's kind of around there. Let's Make Art is going to be at the Tulip Festival. So we're going to be there Thursday, Friday, and Sunday every weekend starting this coming weekend. So if you're around that area, come say hi. I'll be working the booth and we'll be painting postcards, and I hope you come and say hi. We'll be right outside the entrance.
If you don't want to waste your time, I'm coming not this week, but the next week. That's when you should come.
Yeah, Michael will be there then. So if you guys are around there, I hope you stop by and say hi. And I think that's it. So good job, you guys. Thanks for painting with me. That's it. Bye.